Hey folks, Tom Norfleet with www.citizenshipquickly.com. I'm going to go over a program today, basically talking about the perfect tax system that you'll never get from a financial advisor. This is something I've been wanting to talk about a lot, and due to the fact I grew up in this industry and I was in it for many, many years, and we had a thriving business back in the 1980s and 1990s. But before I get started, if you want to hear any new videos that we've got automatically, if you hit the subscription button to the bottom of the screen, just hit that button, you'll get them automatically. Also, I'd like to hear from you if you got a question or comment. I'd be glad to hear from you and see what I can help you on if you got a question there. Let's talk about the perfect tax system that you'll never get from your financial advisor. I passed my Series 663 and 26. These were investment modules that of certifications that you would take to get your securities license in the U.S. This was back in 1986, and I held these licenses for many years as a financial advisor to sell investment products, and I had passed the modules 5, 8, and 9, and also 9A in Singapore. And the information I'm about to tell you about, I never learned in all the training, in all of these training modules that I took. And these tests were pretty complicated, and it covered everything. But I'm currently not a financial advisor now, and I don't recommend financial products such as securities. Our company, Citizenship Quickly AAA Real Estate, is a real estate licensed company in the countries of St. Kitts and Nevis. You will learn in 5 minutes below, what I learned in all my training in dealing with investment products. I learned this simple information from researching and making mistakes. First of all, leaving your high tax country, whether it's Germany, Australia, Norway, Sweden, or France, and getting permanent residence in a territorial tax or pure tax haven in itself will not stop your taxes. This is one of the biggest misnomers people make, and by not seeking out advice on this, they think they've solved their problems, and they have not. The thing that you got to realize is neither will just moving out of the U.S. and relinquishing U.S. citizenship stop your tax if you're a U.S. citizen. If you do not develop a knowledge on this matter or let our company or someone educate you in debt to stay on the right track, you might regret what you've done when you move or you relinquish your citizenship and pay literally hundreds of thousands or even millions of U.S. dollars, Australian dollars, euros, pound sterling, or New Zealand dollar in lost money in taxes and compound interest. Depends on your net worth and what your actual assets are. Putting money into investment retirement accounts that's being invested internationally from your home country, no matter what country you're from, is not in most cases going to tax defer your money. Money in retirement accounts that is invested internationally, regardless of what you think, is taxed every year. This is probably one of the biggest misnomers that people don't understand. The problem with this is they don't teach people this, and they have retirement accounts for years that are taxed on international accounts all the time, and there's no way you can stop it. That's the problem. Let's say that you're an American citizen and you're investing into a U.S.-based international mutual fund that's investing into equities in other countries such as Switzerland, Germany, Australia, whatever. You do this to diversify your money outside the U.S. dollar, so when the currencies of these countries go up against the U.S. dollar, you can have possibly not only on equity made money on your equity going up, which is a stock, but also the currency move on the investment as well. The problem with this is you are having withholding taxes on the dividends on these equities within the mutual fund every year. In most cases, dividends on an average make up around 40 to 50% of your total gains. This is being done in your retirement account. Most people don't know this. Everybody thinks since Switzerland is a tax haven, this country does not tax money invested there. Well, Switzerland, for example, has a 35% withholding tax on dividends, which is one of the highest withholding taxes in the world. It's even higher than Sweden or Norway. You could be losing a ton of money and not even know it. This is over a third of the actual dividend paid out that's going out in taxes. That's a tremendous amount that's being lost every year. France has a withholding tax rate as high as 70% on dividends. In other words, this country likes to leave you with almost nothing at this rate. Remember, you do not send this money out to the revenue department that is supposed to get this money. It is automatically taken out before you get your dividend payout within your retirement account. This is why people don't see it. It's taken out before they even get their money. Outside of retirement accounts, you will always see the deduction for the automatic withholding for the tax on the dividend before you're paid on an international equity that is bought. You notice I said equity, not mutual fund. But even if you have an equity in a retirement account, if it's an international type of equity, you'll see the actual dividend coming out on an equity itself. I'm not talking about a mutual fund, I'm talking about an equity itself. You'll see it coming out. But you can't get the money back. Even if it's a retirement account, it's gone. The money's just, they don't recognize your retirement in an international type investment. You might say it's an IRA, but they're not going to recognize it. And this is the problem that you have with that. Outside of retirement accounts, you always see this deduction for the automatic withholding for the tax on the dividend before you're paid on an international equity, as I mentioned, that is bought, or an international fund, but not if inside the retirement account. This is very deceiving to the public because almost no one knows it. Foreign custodians will treat your retirement account just as if it was not a retirement account by taking out the tax on the dividend. The problem is, if you're a U.S. citizen or U.S. resident, whether a green card holder or not, your regular IRA, Roth IRA, Kia money purchase, 401k, SEP, or other retirement account that issues a dividend will never show this withholding tax on your statement if in an international, frontier, or emerging market fund within a U.S. retirement account. When you see the statement, it will be when the dividend was already taken out. Now, the mutual fund company you invested in will get those records from the custodian from where the stock was purchased, but you won't. And this is why people don't realize this huge tax loss incurred. If you do not buy foreign equities, you can potentially lose a lot from when the dollar falls, which happens about every 11 years. Now, right now we've been in a huge bull market with the dollar, but that somewhere down the road that's going to change. 11 years is about the average bull market cycle of the U.S. dollar currency. Okay. Now let me give you an example of what I was talking about. Everybody's seen the market go up so much since 2008. The problem is if you let's look back a little bit further back to see what's happened. I'm going to give you an example. The S&P 500 index was 1316.16 January the 28th, the year 2000. 10 years later, January the 28th, 2010, the S&P 500 index was 1,073.87. In other words, as you can see, the U.S. stock market S&P 500 index was down a negative 18% 10 years later. That means if you go out 10 years from the year 2000 to 2010, the S&P 500 was down after that 10-year period. Your money did nothing over that period. Now, it's been doing real good lately, but that's going to change. And the point I'm trying to make is the fact that equities that were outside the dollar did real well from that time period, from about 2000 to 2010, because the dollar was falling and other currencies were going up against the US dollar, like the euro, pound sterling, and other currencies too. These are just some examples. Most funds, by the way, underperform the S&P 500 index long term, so a lot of funds did a lot worse than this. A lot of what I've talked about above, of course, was when the US dollar was falling, but during this time period, the UK, the pound sterling, and all these other emerging markets went through the roof. This is why it makes sense to diversify internationally in different currencies, companies, and countries. We call them the 3 C's. If a foreign equity or regular foreign or international mutual fund is bought outside a retirement account, you'll see the withholding tax on your brokerage statement, but this can totally be avoided if you know what you're doing. So again, in a retirement account, you can't get back that money that's in an equity once it's taken out, okay? And that is the problem. I mean, you can, anyway, either way, you're going to be taxed on the dividend, whether in the retirement account or outside the retirement account of equities bought outside the USA. Whether buying a fund that does this or you buying the equity itself, it doesn't make any difference. Let me show you how to make all dividends tax-free, where you'll never have a withholding tax, still diversifying your money. The IRAs will not stop it, like I said, on an international equity or on a mutual fund. The money's still going to be gone. But I'm going to show you how to avoid having any taxes at all. Okay. First of all, no one knows or can tell you with certainty what a stock or mutual fund will do in the future, not even Warren Buffett. He's got a great track record, but he can't tell you for sure what the market's going to do. I do know for sure, though, 100%, if I buy an equity in a certain country, what my withholding tax will be ahead of time. This is an absolute. This is something you do know ahead of time. I know if I buy stock in Switzerland like Nestle or Novartis, which are Swiss stocks bought on a Swiss stock exchange, I'm guaranteed to lose 35% of all the profits paid out to me in a dividend. Now, you know, I never heard anybody talk about this at all as a financial planner for years when I was in that business. As I said, I'm not doing that now. But why would somebody go in an equity to begin with that you know you're going to lose 35% of the total dividend? You know it. It's guaranteed. It doesn't make sense. You don't know what the equity is going to do itself on the growth, but you know whatever dividends paid out, you're going to lose in a Swiss stock 35%. That's 100%. Okay, that's going to happen. I have no idea what either of the above stocks, Novartis or Nestle, will do short-term or long-term as far as the capital appreciation. But I do know that I'm guaranteed to lose that 35%. Why not pick another quality stock that I still do not know how it's going to perform, but to buy it in a place like Hong Kong or Singapore, because Hong Kong equities don't have a withholding tax at all. Now, I don't know what those equities are going to do either, but I do know one thing: I'm not going to lose any of the tax on the dividend because they don't have a withholding tax on dividends. So I know that is 100% going in. That's one thing you can always be sure of, is if you know the tax status, you can bank on that going in. And to me, that's you're ahead of the game right there. Now, the growth of an equity is important, but nobody knows what the equity is going to do. But you should be picking quality equities anyway, no matter where you go. And then base it, I would go first in on what's the tax status of that country, and then pick quality equities from there. I mean, that's, to me, makes a lot more sense. And, you know, go ahead and pick a quality equity. that you might not know what it's going to do, but you do know the tax status. That means you keep 100% of the dividend, and that's guaranteed unless the law changes in Hong Kong, for instance. Now, Brazil, India, UK, on the UK, when I say the UK, I'm talking about equities bought on the London Stock Exchange, not on International Stock Exchange, not only London International Stock Exchange. And Singapore, just some of the other countries that don't have withholding tax on dividends. Remember, if you're a tax resident in a high tax country like Germany or France that taxes worldwide income, or a U.S. citizen that is taxed on your worldwide income no matter where you live, you're still obligated to pay the tax on those dividends until you get out of being a tax resident or you relinquish if a U.S. citizen. Would you like to see the Brazilian and Indian stock exchanges and how they've done long-term versus the U.S. stock market, which is the S&P 500? Well, the IBOV, which is IBOV, that's the Brazilian stock index, it did twice what the rate of return is of the U.S. S&P 500 index over the last approximate 25 years. And the Sensex, which is the Indian index, has done about 40% better, okay, than the S&P 500 index. And remember, the Brazilian companies have no withholding tax on their dividends. That's icing on the cake. This was up to the end of 2018, and then going back 25 years to about 1993. Now, the above example is a history of events, is no indication of what these markets are going to do in the future. In fact, you can lose money in any country's stock market, even long term. This is merely showing you what has been done in the past and has no indication of what's going to happen in the future. I don't know if any country in the world that taxes foreigners on capital gains, including the U.S. Isn't it funny, though, that the IRS in the USA treats foreigners a lot better than its own citizens and green card holders? The U.S. IRS taxes U.S. citizens and green card holders on their interest income from banks and capital gains from the equities, but not foreigners. Isn't that funny? So, by relinquishing your citizenship and then going back and investing later, you're actually treated better. Your gains now have no taxes. And that's not true about the dividends. The dividends, you're still going to have withholding tax unless you pick stocks that don't have, that don't issue dividends. Everything comes out in a capital gain. Then you can avoid all the growth if everything is capital gain and no dividends is issued. Once you do relinquish your U.S. citizenship or become a non-resident for tax purposes from high tax areas such as EU countries, USA, New Zealand, Australia, and any of the high tax country in the world, the USA has provisions where you can actually avoid paying any dividend tax on some of the equities there, only because some do not issue a dividend, which I mentioned before. And you simply do that by just picking equities that don't issue dividends. And I mentioned some of them. Berkshire Hathaway is one of them, which is run by Warren Buffett. Google, Facebook, all of the profits in these equities are all capital gains. I'm not recommending you buy these equities. I'm just stating a point. If you want to avoid taxes on dividends when buying U.S. equities, this is a way to do it legally. Also, you need to know what companies in Hong Kong have a better chance of making more money tax-wise on the corporate profits alone than Swiss companies, because Hong Kong has a corporate tax rate of only 16.5%, where Switzerland has about an average tax rate of 20% when you combine the federal and the Cantonian tax rates together. Do you realize there are 21 countries in the world that do not tax dividends? 21 countries in the world that do not tax dividends, and so many people don't participate in this tax-free status. They just don't know about it. And a lot of these countries have indexes that kill the S&P 500 index long term. And I reiterate, 90% approximately, give or take, Mutual fund managers do not outperform the S&P 500 index long term. There's a lot of years that Buffett hasn't outperformed the index on some years. Now, long term, he's killed the index, but there are years that he doesn't outperform the index. Most people also do not realize that to buy foreign equities with a U.S. broker is usually higher than if you buy through an international broker. But most international brokers will not deal with U.S. citizens or U.S. residents. This is a problem that you have. You literally have to relinquish to your citizenship to do that. Do you realize that most U.S. investors are missing out on China and Hong Kong's huge growth? July the 15th, 1993 was when the first Chinese stocks were listed to be bought on the Hong Kong market. There are now more self-made billionaires in China than in the USA. You got to remember, if you go back to about 1980, there was hardly, I don't think there were any billionaires in China in 1980. I think it took until about the latter part of the 1980s or early 1990s before the first billionaire even was found in China. Now you've got tons of people that are billionaires in China. Warren Buffett made huge profits when he bought PetroChina stock. That's the largest oil company in China, and then sold a few years later for many times what he paid for it. I'm not saying buy this stock. I'm just giving you an example right here. I'm just saying that there are a lot of lost opportunities that U.S. persons are missing out on. There are a lot of opportunities outside the country you're living, and you can avoid 100% of the tax on the dividend if bought in one of these 21 countries that don't tax dividends. You know, just the tax savings I can show you, depending on your assets, can many times make what you pay our company in fees. And these are just some of the things you need to educate yourself on. Some of the cheapest equities in the world now are in Russia, and some are as cheap as 3 to 6 times earnings. Now, I'm doing this as of 2019. This is November of 2019. So, you know, by the time you look at this, it could change. But Russia does have probably some of the cheapest equities of any country in the world now. In most cases, it is more liquid to buy these equities on the London International Stock Exchange instead of buying them on the Moscow Exchange. The withholding tax in Russia is 15% of the dividend. Russia, like most countries, do not have a capital gains tax on Russian equities for foreigners buying them. One thing you have to be careful of is there are also custodian fees to handle the dividend payouts of Russian equities, and this is based on the number of shares you have and not the amount that is invested. So if you have shares of an equity that has a real low price per share, you could have a large amount, and you have got a large amount of shares in this equity. The custodian fees could literally amount to 35% of the total dividend payout. And with your 15% withholding tax could literally be equal to around 50% of the total profits from your actual dividend. So you have to know these things when you're going in these type things. If you have to decide if the fees are worth the bargain at 3 to 6 times earnings. I personally think they are, but that's just incredibly cheap right now. Almost all offshore banks and offshore brokerage companies charge what's called safe custody fees. I call it dirt money because it's like paying for dirt. These companies charge this fee because they say they have to pay extra fees to tabulate keeping your equities, not cash, off their balance sheet to protect your assets from their assets if they go into receivership, which they should. In other words, these assets are ledgered in your name and not the brokerage company's name, although the equity is bought in the name of the bank or brokerage company for privacy purposes. The safe custody fee is a fee based on the amount of your assets, and it can be thousands of dollars depending on the amount of your assets. When you become a client, we'll show you how to avoid this fee totally. Buying property in St. Kitts and Nevis. Okay. this is another thing too that you probably haven't heard of. How many places do you know where you can buy property and all the rental income is tax free? That's pretty nice. I didn't say tax deferred. There's a big difference. It's tax free. Okay, buying property in St. Kitts and Nevis is set up that way. It's one of the best places in the world, in my opinion, to buy property now. If you want to buy real estate and not pay income taxes on rental income, St. Kitts is a great place to do it in, because there is no income tax on rental income and there is no capital gains tax. Property tax is only 0.20% of the purchase amount after $29,629 US dollar deduction is taken off the price of the property. What's left over has that 20 basis points, which is 0.201%, that's taken out. I did a cost comparison on all the English-speaking countries in the Caribbean, and this country, St. Kitts, had some of the cheapest prices I ran across. Think about this. What would draw wealthy foreigners to this place to begin with? Well, number one is it's got the best asset protection laws in the world, whereby lawsuits have the shortest statute of limitation period of almost any country in the world except for Belize. But as far as I'm concerned, the prices and what you can get property for and the beauty is a lot better in St. Kitts than Belize. If you want to protect your assets from lawsuits, this is a place to put them. This is a place to set up an asset protection trust or an LLC. It's the best place in the world for this purpose. These two countries, St. Kitts and Nevis, do not recognize lawsuits won against an individual in another country. The Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis have great asset protection laws that constantly lure money from people in the USA and from all over the world wanting to protect their assets from lawsuits. And a lot of this money goes into real estate, which is another constant driving force on the real estate market in St. Kitts and Nevis. I don't know of any English-speaking country in the world that has eliminated their income tax where the property values in that country did not go through the roof. Some examples of those few countries that have given up their income tax, that properties have gone through the roof, are the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, Monaco, and these properties in these locations have gone up dramatically. The land prices in St. Kitts and Nevis is so much cheaper and a much prettier place to live in than the above countries I mentioned, and you can get citizenship in this country in as quick as about 4 months by purchasing land or a condo here. One thing too, I just checked on the other day, I saw where St. Kitts and Nevis had the second lowest pollution rate of any country in the world. And as I'm doing these videos here, I'm in Philippines. I'm going to be here for several months. But I'm going to tell you something. One thing I really want to bring out that I don't like about the Philippines, the air quality in every place I go to here is just so different than St. Kitts and Nevis. For St. Kitts and Nevis, I'm comparing apples and oranges because St. Kitts and Nevis is they have the second clearest air on a rating that was done of any country in the world. And I can tell as soon as I get off the plane and I hit that fresh air in the Caribbean, it's the best weather best fresh air that I've ever had anywhere. And the weather's real good too. But you don't get that in the Philippines. Every place I've been to, the air there is a lot of pollution. That's one thing I don't like. It's cheap, but then what's cheapness worth? If you die at a young age, and that is one problem that you have in the Philippines. Cheap, yeah, but every place I go, you got air quality problems. Another reason you're going to see huge increases in property prices in St. Kitts is there's going to be a huge migration of retirees retiring called the baby boomers that are going to be retired in places that are warm with low taxes. And the Caribbean is and always has been a very popular destination for these people. because of its proximity to the United States. St. Kitts was just named as a high-income area by the World Bank and was recently listed as having the second lowest air pollution of any country in the world, which I've just mentioned to you. The Federation used to be an overseas territory of the UK, but in the early 1980s broke away from the UK to become a sovereign nation, and then in the early 1990s, this country eliminated the personal income tax. There's most of the countries that don't have an income tax now are in the Gulf, and it's almost impossible to get citizenship there. Right after the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis broke away from the UK, the Economic Citizenship Program was introduced, and is now the longest running economic citizenship program in existence. It's over 30 years old. The Federation offers one of the best passports in the world. This is the reason so many people are buying property here. This country also does not have a capital gains tax, inheritance tax, or estate tax. The world is your market, and with 7 billion people in the world, you can run your business from anywhere. This has been made very easy with the internet, especially with Skype, WhatsApp, MagicJack, and overseas calling now is free with these devices. You can literally, for 20 years ago, the cost of working overseas could be very expensive. Now you literally can do it free with the internet. And this is the reason so many people are buying here. It's got a democracy. The politicians that are elected are done freely through elections. Both political parties have seen that by not having an income tax, it's lured a lot of investment into the country. You don't really have a liberal party. If you take the Liberal Party over here, they're more conservative than the most conservative party in the U.S. Neither party wants the income tax. And in the U.S., you got both parties that want it. You know, it's totally different over here. And they don't want to ever bring back the income tax. And this is why it attracts so many people, and it's close to the U.S. So, you know, if you want to go back and forth to the U.S., you can do that. It's so close to the different sections of the U.S. on the East Coast. They've got really good private schools in St. Kitts. All dental care is free for nationals starting at age 60. Medical care is free if done in the hospital. Of course, you have to be a national, and you got to be at least 62 years old to qualify for the free medical care in the hospital and dental care at 60 years old. Can you imagine a country having all these benefits with no income tax? Well, St. Kitts is doing it. You know, no income tax and all these free health care benefits. This is what happens when you're a smaller country. It's a lot easier to organize the finances better. Become a client and let St. Kitts Real Estate be part of your investment portfolio. We can show you, work with you, and show you how to get your taxes down to zero with real estate. And if you're going to be investing in equities, we won't tell you which equities to go into, but we can give you the strategy on where to go to keep your broker rates low, and also how to eliminate the taxes when you do buy equities. If you got any questions, shoot us a comment below and be glad to answer it for you. Also, if you want new videos as they come out, if you'll hit the subscription button, I'll be glad to get new videos as they come back out to you. Appreciate you watching today, and stay tuned for our next video. Thanks.